Welcome to the American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th Anniversary podcast series. In this commemorative series, past presidents and other leaders of the American Nephrology Nurses Association will provide a rich history of the association itself and of nephrology nursing as a specialty nursing profession. The American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th Anniversary podcast series is brought to you by the Nephrology Nursing Journal, the official journal of the American Nephrology Nurses Association. We are honored to present this episode, and we hope you enjoy these invaluable and enlightening nephrology nursing recollections.
Hello, my name is Karen Robbins, and I'm the Associate Editor of the Nephrology Nursing Journal, as well as a past president of ANNA. It's my honor today to interview Lesley Dinwiddie, who was president of ANNA from 2004 to 2005. Thank you for joining us today, Lesley, to talk about ANNA and nephrology nursing.
Well, thank you, Karen. It's both an honor and a privilege to do so. I'm excited.
Okay, well, let's start with your nursing career and how you became a nephrology nurse. What was your first experience?
Well, you know, in Australia, mothers did not work, so I didn't think I'd ever be a nurse again, but pretty soon after my son was born, I found that being a stay-at-home mom was not good for him or for me. I just realized I'd have to go back to school to learn more about nursing in the U.S., but I didn't know what kind of nursing I wanted to be in, so I became a float nurse at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences campus, and I found that the area that I enjoyed most was the nephrology floor. It was so interesting, and the staff was so professional, and it was just such an exciting opportunity for me. And right around that time, the opportunity arose for me to become a family nurse practitioner. They had a special program at UMSC, but I had to have a physician preceptor. That was back in the day. And so the transplant nephrologist became my preceptor, and I was so very, very fortunate as I became the first kidney transplant coordinator in Arkansas at that time, and as they say, the rest is history.
All right, thank you. Well, I know that since you've become a nephrology nurse, you've been active in ANNA for a number of years, and you've held a number of different positions. I think when you were president, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Conditions for Coverage were under revision under the Medicare Modernization Act, and that had not been revised in decades. So please talk more about this and nephrology nursing during this time.
Well, let me just start, though, Karen, with how I got started in ANNA, and I spoke about how professional the nurses were there, and they had a local chapter, the Arkansas chapter, and I very quickly became inducted into that chapter, and as you know, as soon as you get inducted into a chapter like that, you become a chapter officer very quickly, too. So in 1981, I think it was, I had just gotten my nurse practitionership, and Olivia DeLingo took me to the Southeast AANNT meeting in Atlanta, and it was just an amazing experience. My eyes just popped. Nancy Sharp was president at the time, and Annette Froman did a one-day seminar on end-stage renal disease assessment. Gail Wick was the Southeast vice president. My jaw just dropped. These were such professional, incredible women. My board of directors that year was just incredible, and I'm so glad because we had that huge responsibility that you just talked about, the conditions for coverage, the federal regs that had not been revised since their inception back in the 70s and had been added to. They were in desperate need of revision, especially with all the changes that were happening in nephrology care. We had the responsibility of responding to the draft of these regulations, and I was extremely grateful that past President Caroline Counts took the leadership on that. We had Glenda Payne from CMS on our board. She was the secretary. We just had all of these incredible people. And the biggest challenge was that the large dialysis organizations were saying that they wanted to do away with the regulation that a nurse had to be present at time of hemodialysis. And we felt that that was just disastrous to patient care not to have a nurse present. And so ANNA decided during that year that we would fund research to show that a nurse was necessary at all times during hemodialysis care in the facility. And as you know, Charlotte Thomas Hawkins led that incredibly successful research showing what a difference a nurse makes in the care of a patient. CMS not only required a nurse to be present, but required a registered nurse to be present. You know, to me, that was both the biggest challenge and the greatest advancement, as well as just a wonderful proof of the power and the need for professional nursing.
So that was to specify that the nurse was a registered nurse.
Correct.
And no disrespect to license that vocational or practical nurses.
Exactly.
But the registered nurse is the one who has the assessment and planning skills.
Absolutely. You're right on, Karen. That's exactly what it said. And I think it was an advancement for nephrology nursing to have that put into the conditions for coverage that are still in existence now.
Well, that was certainly another example of ANA's advocacy for patients and for patient safety.
Yes, indeed. I think the other thing that was popping right around that time that I just found as much of a challenge as it was a huge opportunity for us in patient care was that with the KDOQI guidelines, we'd been through the DOQI guidelines that were revised and became the KDOQI guidelines in 2001. But I think the huge step forward in nephrology patient care was when the National Kidney Foundation came out with the staging of chronic kidney disease. Remember, we used to talk about pre-dialysis patients, and we had no idea what that was. It was just a lump of patients who had some form of kidney disease in some stage, but there was no definition. So I think the staging...
Or renal insufficiency.
Renal insufficiency,
it's just the term renal
exactly.
insufficiency. What did that mean?
Exactly, or chronic renal insufficiency. I mean, it was just one of those a hodgepodge things that you had no clue what it meant. You just knew that these patients were sick and getting sicker. But with the staging, we were able to take segments of patients and say, what does this patient need now? Where are we at? What are the signs and symptoms in each of these stages? What is the care that should be given for these? And I think that all of this came along, as I say, in the very early 2000s, and we had fistula first in 2003. And we had all of these things that we were having to change practice for. And so my year of 2004, 2005 was huge with the educational needs that we needed to put in place, the publications that we needed to get out in order to do the education of the nurses so they could better care for the patients. But also we realized there was a quality care conference in my year 2004. And we had this poster that we took to this quality care conference talking about teaching non-nephrology nurses who were caring for our hemodialysis patients in other settings, like nursing homes, like general hospitals, that kind of thing. Most people that are not in nephrology nursing are scared to death of taking care of our patients. They are so very, very ill. And we set about, and I think that this was huge, we set about putting together partnering for quality care at continuing education program for chronic kidney disease back there for these long-term care facilities. And that led to more in the series. Then back in 2005, it was first published. So that was part of our year, but then I had the great privilege of being the project coordinator to update these in 2015. We started in 2013. It was huge because it needed a total revision, and we added on peritoneal dialysis. We added on end-of-life care. We had pediatric care in there as well. And so it wound up being an 8-module series that we produced in 2015. And it's titled Chronic Kidney Disease, What Every Nurse Caring for the CKD Patient Should Know. And what was really exciting for me about this was that our past president, Sally Burroughs Hudson, who was president of the ICEA Institute, after her death, we dissolved ICEA and we took our funding from the Treasury to fund this series of modules so that they could be free to any nurse, either a nephrology nurse, anyone who visits the ANNA website can download any one of these modules. With money, they can get CE for them, but just to view them and learn from them, it's free. So I think this was huge, and I'm very, very proud of that achievement that ANNA has made in the education of non-nephrology personnel in the care of our patients.
Well, I think that's, a wonderful thing to have done because, as you said, people caring for patients with chronic kidney disease are sometimes really apprehensive about it because they're such a complex patient population. So that was a great step toward providing education for nurses not in nephrology. Can you talk about it educationally that feeds into the publications that were released during your tenure as president? Can you share with our listeners more about that?
Yeah, because as I said, that was such a time of change that we had to update all of our publications. So we actually had the Nephrology Nursing Standards of Practice and Guidelines for Care was already in review in 2004, and it was actually published. It was the second edition that was published in 2005, and we were already working on the second edition of Contemporary Nephrology Nursing. That was due to be published in 2006. And we also realized that we had to get out another edition of the core curriculum, the fifth edition, because of these changes. And so we approved the funding at that time. All the way through this, we've just seen incredible advancement in the education and sophistication of the Nephrology Nursing Journal throughout these years. I think one of the huge pieces of my education and the privilege of being on the journal editorial board during the 90s, again, another huge benefit of being part of ANNA's leadership as well as just being a member, getting that Nephrology Nursing Journal either online or in paper print, it's just such an essential piece of our everyday practice. I just see it going from greater to greater things, and nephrology nursing has just been a huge recipient of the value of this, as have our patients and other nephrology professionals in the discipline.
You mentioned, Lesley, you were on the editorial board for the Nephrology Nursing Journal. You've done a number of things since your presidency. Can you tell us about some of the opportunities that have been afforded you because of your experience and networking within the association?
It's just been quite an incredible journey, but I want to concentrate just for a second on the ANNA leadership part, because one of the things that popped into my mind this morning was that I no sooner was finishing up as past president on the board than found that I went to a local chapter meeting and discovered that there was no one from the chapter offices was able to represent the chapter at the upcoming national symposium. And I said, well, I'm going to be there. And it also turned out that they did not have a president-elect. Guess what happened? I became the president-elect of the Cardinal chapter. And I realized, and I think having worked on the national level throughout the previous years, I realized that all the chapters were struggling in North Carolina to put on an annual educational meeting. And we had Texas, they had been doing for years the Texas Collaborative, where they brought all the chapters of Texas together for an annual meeting. And so it was sort of a no-brainer to look at this with the other chapters in North Carolina. So back in 2007, we had our first, it was a 2-day meeting, and we had over 150 participants. We did a certification review. It was enormously successful, both professionally as well as financially, for all of the chapters. And we've continued to do that. It has met such a need in our North Carolina, and not just for North Carolina. We get folks from Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee coming for this meeting. So that is on the ANNA side that I have been doing. Professionally, the networking that I was able to do during those years of my presidency and with my vascular access special interest from my work at the University of North Carolina, I was able to start my own consulting company. It was Vascular Access for Hemodialysis, both education and consulting, back in 2008, and this was thanks to a recommendation from our president, Linda Ball. She had been in touch with the people-to-people about doing a delegation to China, and unfortunately for health reasons she couldn't do it at that time, and so she suggested me. Had 2 wonderful delegations to China in 2008, 2009, and then another one to South Africa in 2011. This has just been a tremendous experience in what the years that I'm supposedly officially retired. I'll always be interested in what's happening in nursing and nephrology nursing especially. I don't think I'll ever be officially retired.
So, Lesley, as we celebrate 50 years of A&A, what do you see in your looking glass for the next 50 years?
The innovation that's going on in nephrology right now with wearable kidneys, with being able to grow new blood vessels for vascular access, there's so much going on that nursing positions, that I think is the beauty of being a nurse. Our basic education as nurses and what we've learned over the years in nephrology nursing, we can shape what we do professionally with whatever innovation comes along, both scientifically as well as legally. We've got the basic education to be the ones that can bring this to reality with patient care. So the research that it's going to take and the nurse's role in that research, we have to be right at the forefront of that, and I think we can be. We must be. I just see that we will be doing a lot more in the nurse practitioner arena, taking care of chronic kidney disease patients and just being able to expand their experience tremendously. So there's lots ahead for us, but I think in the future of nursing, the IOM publication of 2011, I think we've got to look at that and take it to heart and put it into practice. We can and we should be practicing to the full extent of our profession and education. The educational opportunities out there are huge, and we should be going after them. I definitely think, though, that we cannot do it. I know that I would never have been able to do it without being part of my professional nursing organization, ANNA. One of the things that I haven't talked about here, but when looking back over my CV earlier, I got my undergraduate education. I was able to pay for that because I had a career mobility scholarship that I got back in 1983 that paid for my total undergraduate education. And it's just incredible what ANNA can do for the nurse who really is looking forward to being the best that she can be in her profession. I see a synergy there that I just can't imagine how nurses who are not part of their organization, who really want to develop a career as a nephrology nurse, how they could do that without being part of the American Nephrology Nurses Association. So I think we've got a great future. We've got great publications. I think the ANNA Forum is an incredible way that nurses can get information for both practice problems as well as educational issues, can get immediate feedback. I think ANNA is doing an outstanding job in that area and the publications. I think our professional advocacy piece in Washington is also extremely important, and we have to continue to be involved with that, both interdisciplinary-wise as well as for nursing. So, yeah, I think the future looks very, very bright for nephrology nursing. I won't be around in another 50 years to look back on that, but I know that there will be many that can and will do a great job.
Lesley, thank you so much for having been a part of this first 50 years of ANNA and nephrology nursing. It's been my privilege today to talk with Lesley Dinwiddie, president of ANNA from 2004 and 2005. And I want to thank you, Lesley, again for your service and leadership and for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you.
It has been a privilege. Thank you, Karen.
The American Nephrology Nurses Association's 50th anniversary podcast series is brought to you by the Nephrology Nursing Journal, the official journal of the American Nephrology Nurses Association. This series is owned and produced by the American Nephrology Nurses Association. All rights reserved. No portion of this podcast may be used without written permission. For archived episodes of this podcast and to learn more about the American Nephrology Nurses Association, visit the association's website at annanurse.org. You can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, our hosting site Spreaker, and other various podcast delivery services.